Hi, welcome back to our oral presentation session, where we'll see some very important information and research that's founded by our research faculty here at Oakwood University. We will start off with a brief word of prayer. Let's bow your heads. Dear Lord in heaven, thank you once again for allowing us to make it back here today at this session to hear some really important research information. I pray that it may be with the presenters and all the attendees that are watching this event. Thank you once again for your blessings, we pray. Amen. All right, so I want to introduce the moderator for this session. It's Dr. Theodore Brown. He's a professor and chair of the Department of Business and Information Systems. He will introduce his presenter and we will turn it over to him.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good morning to everyone. And we bring you greetings from the School of Business. I would like to introduce Professor Richard Blanco Toppings, who is an assistant professor of healthcare administration in the School of Business. Dr. Blanco received his PhD from Capella University. He has served at Loma Linda in the School of Public Health, and also he has taught the Graduate School of Population Health, Nutrition, and Wellness at Andrews University. This is his fourth year. He's finishing up his fourth year here at Oakwood University. He's a very esteemed professor in the department, and at this time, he will be presenting to you his research. Dr. Richard Blanco Toppings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. It's good to have you close by. Hello, colleagues, Oakwood family, friends. It's a privilege for me to present my work to you, and hopefully that you like it and it can contribute to your knowledge in the field, or otherwise bring something new to you. So let me go ahead and just share my screen. That's the case. Yeah, so let me just put this up there. All right. Okay, then we're ready to go. Well, we know that healthcare here in America, it's very fragmented, and there are many issues as it relates to healthcare services, financing, access, also experience. So I took the time to analyze how changes that are made in the healthcare system or by the federal government affect the patients, and specifically the patient perceptions. So the purpose of this study was to investigate if the strategy, the implementation of a new payment model by HHS, Health and Human Services, through CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, how does that impacted patient satisfaction? And that allows me to go ahead to research and find the data. But of course, there has to be an issue. There's a problem we try to solve, or at least to facilitate or policymakers and leaders across the nation to overcome this issue. So we know that trillions of dollars are spent each year in the U.S. healthcare system, and it's very expensive. Although that's the case, we are having access issue. And for every dollar that is spent for the U.S. economy, about 18% of that is going to healthcare. And that's a main issue, especially when compared to other nations, other developed nations as well, to look at the outcomes and lifespan as well. This is the problem. Statement of the problem. Research literature on healthcare payment models and patient satisfaction indicates that fee-for-service model allows volume payment and does not contribute to cost containment, while bundle payments contribute to cost reduction while quality is preserved. We're going to get a little more details to define what these are as we move to the next slide. So we know that there are models out there and what they're doing, but still, what is not known, if this new payment model adopted by the state of Maryland during year 2014 will have an impact on patient experience, patient satisfaction. And we're going to go more in more details with these definitions. So just let's hold on there as we get there. Okay, so when we talk about payment models, those that have been in place, fee-for-service is the oldest payment model in America, which is you paid for everything, syringes and service at bed, all that is provided during your surgery, for instance, the needles, I mean, all the material, the doctor's time is like going to the supermarket and you receive after punching your card, receive your receipt, and there's a list of products with the amounts, are the cost of each one of them, and your total payment. So that's your service. And the healthcare system is trying to move for many years now away from that model because it's not really adding value or measuring value. Although that's the case, there is still some use of it. Some people try to change a new payment model, but you still have that component within their services. The pay for performance is another latest type of payment model that looks at patient outcomes. So if patient outcomes improve for hospitals, they financially get a benefit out of that as well. And that's try to motivate the providers to do a better job, not only to provide a service, but to lower the rates of cancer and other diseases that are out there. And then we have bundled payment, where depending on the type of disease that you have, you may be classified, and then that package will be given to you or to the patients for them to manage, hopefully lower cost and more access. That's the case. Now, I bring this model forward. I created this model just to give you an example of what I'm talking about when it comes to global payment model. So the federal government gave Maryland a lump sum of money for them to take care of their patients. And these we're talking about inpatient settings, so hospitals that are licensed for that as well. And this is what my research is about. So they received that money during 2014, and hospitals were able to interact with patients. So I'm wondering, my question is, does this type of strategy or implementation of strategy will impact the patient perceptions? Which means that if I'm giving you a lump sum, some kind of capitated amount of money, and you have to manage that money, and depending on the result, the final results, if you have leftover or there's a money left after operations, well, hospitals, providers of care will be benefited by that amount of money. So there have to be good stewards, good management, but there is a critical side of that. There's a high risk that by doing this, it could also negatively impact patient outcomes, perceptions, and so many areas of the population. And therefore, patient perceptions, there are 9 variables that I'm looking at there, dependent variables, and these are measured to decide if the perceptions increase significant or not for this study. Hopefully that helps a little as we move on. So talking about this study, it's a cross-sectional, which means that we're using different populations. And we're looking at 2013, that was before, and during 2014 and 2015. We're not using the same individuals because this survey is sent out once to inpatient individuals that have been overnight at a hospital. At least over one night in the emergency department, in the surgery, wherever they may be, but they have stayed there for more than one night. Okay, so we use a non-paralytic convenience sample. There was like over 47 hospitals. I think I have that right there. Yeah, 42. And then for those 47, I had to clean the data. I had to look at, if a hospital submitted a report or not, or whatever happens. If the report wasn't there, then I had to exclude a hospital. And that brought me down to 42 hospitals. I think that number's within the limit for this type of study as well. So the responses for patients consist of average rates. So we're looking at rates, looking at number, we are looking at percentages of those who responded to the 9 variables that I showed you before on the model, right? Yeah, these 9 variables, we'll move forward and see their names in the following slides. So how does this work? Where do the hospitals get this data? What's the mechanism of this? Well, after being inpatient for a couple of days, weeks, hospitals use a third-party vendor to provide those patients with a survey. The patient receives the survey and they answer the questions and then mail it back to the address that was given to them. So that third payer or vendor, for instance, submit that to CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, on a quarterly basis. Therefore, we have constant report of these surveys results. They're a constant report and they are public domain. So you may want to go look at that if that may help you with your interest as well in healthcare and patients ratings, perceptions. So I downloaded from Medicare Gov and for the years 2013, 14, and 15, because I'm looking at 3 points in time, before, during, and after, to see if there's significant impact on patient perceptions. So the instrument comes from HCAHPS, as you see there, defined Hospital Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Providers and Services, who develop the survey and also the ones that process it as well. So the dependent variables as they are on the survey are communication with nurses, communication with doctors, responsiveness of hospital staff, pain management, communication about medicines, discharge information, care transition, overall hospital rating, and recommended hospital. So we're looking at the interactions or the communication with nurses, doctors, and hospital staff, right? Who has been, helping the patients during their stay at the hospital. So we're looking at patient being at the hospital, we're looking at the patient in transitions to go home, and while they're going home as well. That's where the patients rate the type of service that they receive from their providers. So we'll look at independent variable for this type of analysis, and this is a one-way analysis of variance, ANOVA, and we will use time as part of the independent variable, which is not affected by anything, and how this model impact the providers during that same period of time. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. So I added this table just to also give you a better understanding of what I did. So for instance, communication with nurses, I took the top box questions. Top box question means like the most positive answers from the patient. So I didn't go through always, sometime, never, no. I took the most positive top box and used that for this study, okay? So if you can see there, it says answer always and ratio. So their percentage, they fall within the conditions for this type of study, the assumptions on this type of study, they are active. And then the overall hospital rating, if after going through all of that, what's the rating? Will you say 9 or 10? So it's like 9 or 10. It's 7, 8, 6, 5, 6. So those are the patient and choose one of those different elements or from the survey to respond to it. And then at the final, you can see that patients who reported yes, they will definitely recommend the hospital. So I'm looking at the most positive. So it's yes or no in this case for those that have yes. Okay, and the 3 years. Again, they're not the same patient. We're looking at different individuals to go to 3 years of analysis. So as I said before, I use a one-way analysis of variance to analyze secondary data sets. Secondary, I did not, let me be clear, I did not collect the data. The data is there publicly available, and doing my research, got to know that there were this data for many years that is sitting there for patient perceptions and also for patient outcomes as well, and many other variables that are there. And I was able to get in there, download the data set to my computer, and from there extract the data that has to do with hospitals per state. Now, there are almost 5,000 hospitals. So I specifically go to the state of Maryland because of this agreement between the federal government and the state that was unique at the time when I was looking at it. And then having that new model in place and having this patient perception data, I said, okay, I think I can make my case here. Let me see if this really works for this type of study. Okay, so we use 3 or more groups. It falls within the methodology of the assumptions of this study. 3 or more groups, and we're looking at differences in mean, no, from 2013 to 2015, 2013, 14, and 14, 15, and so forth. Yes, I did some descriptive statistics is also included in this presentation. Not all of it, just some portion, just to explain what I did. And the alpha was set to significance was set to 0.05 for this study. So, okay, just managing the time here. Okay, so this is my research question. Are there significant differences in patient satisfaction scores between different years in the implementation cycle of a new payment model? Specifically, does patient satisfaction as measured by the hospital consumer assessment of healthcare providers and systems significantly differ by year in the Maryland Global Payment implementation cycle? So that's what I was looking at the time. It's significant with the patient rating and significant between groups as well, to see where those significance fall. Okay. So specifically, I jumped to variable number 6, which was the only significant one, and as you can see, it was MP 30.03. That is the only significant statistical variable that I found there. The other ones, as I look at it, there were like trends. But again, I want to also let you know that this was a preliminary study, because they just implemented that model. So we are at the initial stage of it. So although that's the case, it was looking good. I have a couple of the variables that went negative, but we're going to look at it on the following tables. So there's it. Yeah, there it is. So as I'm moving forward and with the time, we can see that R6, question 6, there was 0.30. One of the things that come to my attention, is that the patients R9, for instance, patient satisfaction of the overall hospital rating improves after implementation of Maryland Global Payment Model wasn't significant. So if everything was good, all the rest were good, well, why wouldn't you rate yes? Or R10, question 10, it says, patient willingness to recommend the hospital changes after implementation of Maryland Global Payment Model. So willingness to recommend the hospitals to friends and family, and it wasn't a positive. It wasn't significant. It was farther away from that. So in my recommendations, I think that I added that it would be good to hear from the patient's observations, written, if that's possible, to know what else, because the questionnaire, is restricted to these answers. But what is it? Is there a specific experience that the patient had that wasn't satisfied with it, but is not on the survey? So that's very important when we moving forward in that line. So this is just an example. I just want to share this with you. It's significance from 2013, and then was almost 58, and then 60%, and then 65. These are the patient ratings, and your left side, and below are the 3 years, the 3 groups, for instance. And well, I had only one positive, and there is this assumption also that if you only have one positive, that may not be the case. So I had to run an additional test to ensure that this barber was really positive. So I run the 2K and Bonferroni. No, 2K is for large data sets, and Bonferroni is for smaller data sets when you're doing a study. So anyway, I add both of them there just to show that, yes, there were significance between groups, as we see 2013 highlighted, 2015, and over here, the significance column, we also can notice that for each of these analyses, 2013, 2015 were significant and stand, as supported by these ad hoc comparisons. So I think we're almost there with the time, seconds to go, but that's what I did and work it out, was able to publish it and was accepted as well. So I think we're moving into questions, Dr. Brown.
Blanco, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. And thank you for that outstanding presentation and research study on healthcare. So we got a couple of questions. When you did your study, you're talking about funding. So one of the questions is, does quality healthcare equate with adequate funding in your study based on in the healthcare profession? Sometimes you say, well, if the state's paying for it, you got that payment model, but does good healthcare equate with quality funding? Is it predicated on quality funding? That's the first question.
Yeah, and quality funding. I think we have to define what's quality
Adequate funding.
Adequate funding.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, healthcare is about service, and not unfortunately, but that's what healthcare is about. So if your fundings are maybe channeled to the right places, the management of the hospital or the clinics are really being intelligent how they're spending that money, it could have a good impact. But again, we are working in a fragmented environment, and whatever you build over it, going to be affected because there are so many strengths pulling different sides. So in this case, we talk about the federal government providing funds for Maryland. There could be some pressure there, They
Right. Okay.
have to change models, they have to change processes, policies, and patients kind of, okay, things changed. Did anyone communicate anything to us? And then the model is, okay, can we take patients out of the hospitals to community clinics, for instance, or to be served at home? It depends, one suit doesn't fit all. But I believe that it can be done. It can be done if we have can we check or following up the strategies in place, the processes to make that happen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Blanco.
Yes, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. So now we're going to turn it over to our next moderator, Dr. Lisa James. She is the chair of the Mathematics and Computer Science Department, and she will introduce her speakers.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Our next presenter is Dr. Alexander George Volkov. Dr. Volkov is a professor with a worldwide reputation for research in the field of interfacial chemistry and electrophysiology of plants. Dr. Volkov has published 8 books, 50 reviews, and 210 articles in peer-reviewed journals, which include 50 articles with undergraduate students. Dr. Volkov received grants from the National Science Foundation, NASA, the U.S. Department of Defense, and the United Negro College Fund, totaling $7.5 million. Dr. Volkov, thank you so much for your dedication to research, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much for your kind presentation. And due to delay, I have, instead of 25 minutes, just 14, maximum 14 minutes. So I will go fast and briefly discuss this nitrogen fixation in our system. So, 1 second. I need to share screen. Share screen, and I don't know how to do it. I don't have my PowerPoint here on screen. Share screen. I'm sorry, I don't know how to show you PowerPoint presentation because when I press share, I don't see anything here, just different screens. So since share button does not work, maybe better to cancel this presentation. I don't know if you can see it, PowerPoint slides. I have it on my screen. When I press share, I have video file, which I don't have. I have share screen, PowerPoint, and I cannot find in this program my PowerPoint presentation. Okay, I will just briefly talk about what did we do in Oakwood during last 5 months with my students. We did fixation of nitrogen. Nitrogen is gas which we have in our air. It's about 78% of air. And it's difficult to convert nitrogen to any other compounds because it's very stable. Energy of activation is very high, and common methods cannot convert nitrogen to nitrogen-containing compounds. There is 120-year-old method, German, Haber and Bosch. They use very high temperature, very high pressure to convert nitrogen to finally nitric acid, HNO3. But we need to spend a lot of energy for this process and very high temperatures, very high pressures. Business for conversion of nitrogen to nitrogen compound for production of different nitrogen containing compounds and fertilizer is $60 billion per year. But ecologically, it's very bad method because we use combustion and emit huge amount of carbon dioxide to atmosphere. We found new method to do it without high temperature, similar as it happened in nature, nitrogen fixation, but instead of bacteria, we use cold plasma. So when we use cold plasma, we apply this plasma to water, and we got interface between three different phases. Plasma, air, and water. And plasma, air, and water create nitrogen fixation, oxidation of nitrogen and oxidation of water, and production of nitric oxides, and finally nitric acid. So generally, instead of plasma helium, we can use plasma air. It will be very cheap process. But of course, Oakwood cannot get $60 billion because we don't have railway station to send nitric oxide to customers. But it's very efficient method and ecologically clean. Also, this method, plasma activated water will have huge application for disinfection, deactivation, against bacteria, against different viruses, including COVID virus and fungi. So it can be used in medicine and can have very successful application in different types, in different fields of medicine. I have some messages. But it does not work. I can press on share screen. And share screen. Oh, I have now. I don't know how it happened. Somebody help me. Thank you. I hope you can see it. So this is nitrogen fixation. I will show you all slides in 5 minutes. This is nitrogen fixation in nature. Only specific bacteria can fix nitrogen for us. And plant can convert this nitrogen compound to amino acids. And we can digest it, and this is major source of amino acids and for synthesis of protein in nature. I will skip this. This is low temperature plasma, produce helium cations, electrons, UV visible radiation, and high frequency electromagnetic field, which produce a lot of different compounds. This is, we call them ROMs, reactive oxygen and nitrogen species. So here is about Haber-Bourne process. For 1 ton of HNO3, we need to spend 30 gigajoules of energy and produce a lot of carbon dioxide in atmosphere during combustion for increasing of temperature. This is called plasma system in our lab and chemistry department. We have electronic devices, 8,000 volts, and function generator converted to pulses 1 nanosecond each. Here we have plasma jet, and we can put here something to this water, and we will convert fast nitrogen from air to water. For industry, we suggested to use instead ultra pure helium, just compressed air. It will be very cheap to make nitrogen compound for industry. So major problem for nitrogen fixation, too high energy activation, which does not depend on temperature. And if we increase temperature, in this case, rate constant will increase because this term will decrease. Here is low temperature plasma effect on biotissue, all in bold fonts. This is what we discovered here at Oakwood. And there are some additional information in literature about plasma effect on biotissue. It has positive application and negative. So this is experimental device, this plasma jet. This is our water plasma jet. You can see plasma has border this air outside. And blue layer from both sides is area of multi-electron chemical reaction between plasma and air. And on surface of water, we have interfacial multi-electron reaction in which all 3 phases interact one, this, another. Finally, we got major product HNO3 and some co-product as a small amount of hydrogen peroxide at HNO2. Using sensor, we found during short treatment of water by plasma how much HNO3 we got, how much HNO2 impurities, and small amount of hydrogen peroxide. Major product what we need for industry is nitric acid. And we also measure dependence on proton production, on pH, on this interface, and this is proton concentration depending on time. We analyzed thermodynamics and found it's two-electron reaction of water oxidation to hydrogen peroxide. This production of 2 electrons and 2 protons, which can be used for nitrogen reaction. So a mechanism I will show you later. This is theoretical part about energy activation and reionization for multi-electron reaction at the interface, fluid interfaces. This is our equation, which we developed a long time ago. And in short, we can write for energy activation this formula. So at the interface, water plasma, energy activation can be decreased by electrostatic energy of bringing component of reaction directly to interface. And energy activation can permit us to do synchronous multi-electron reaction at water plasma air interface. So we use this method even before and published many papers. Today, our paper, the student, was accepted by publishing house Elsevier and will be published in Electrochemical Act soon. Paper is in press. And this is mechanism red arrow for synthesis from nitrogen-containing compound HNO3. So this is more chemical reaction in details, and we can skip conclusions. And I would like to thank my students. I collaborated also with Dr. Patel on this plasma topic. And this is my student who work on this project. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I have to take my wife to surgery center in 20 seconds.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Volkov, for that presentation. I know you had some trouble with the PowerPoint, but I have a question for you if you have time. I know you have to run.
At 11:50, I need to take my wife to surgery center.
Okay.
And now it's 11:50. I can give you a print of this paper if you want.
Now, my quick question is, please forgive me. I'm not familiar with a lot of chemistry, but HNO2, you say in your, it's unstable.
Yes.
What makes it unstable, and how is HNO3 stronger?
HNO2 unstable because it can be oxidized, can be reduced. In presence of hydrogen peroxide, HNO3 oxidized to HNO3. But without hydrogen peroxide, it can oxidize something else. It's very unstable compound. We cannot buy it. We can synthesize for a short period of time. And goal of this work is to produce HNO3. HNO2 nobody does not need.
Okay.
Thank
you so much. Thank you, Dr. Volkov, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you for all you do at Oakwood University and for our students.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I also have the privilege of introducing our next set of presenters. We have 3 presenters next. The principal investigator is Professor Sofia Woolheen-Nava. Professor Nava is an assistant professor of Spanish in the Department of English and Foreign Languages at Oakwood University. She teaches beginning as well as advanced courses in composition, phonetics, and phonology and grammar. She specializes in L2 curriculum development and second language acquisition action research, which allows her to connect her research to the classroom. She holds a Master of Arts in Teaching Spanish from Northern Arizona University. Then we have two co-investigators. The first is Dr. Eva Michelle Wheeler. Dr. Weaver is an associate professor of Spanish in the Department of English and Foreign Languages at Oakwood. Dr. Wheeler is a sociocultural linguist whose work positions linguistic analysis as a framework within which to examine and analyze social phenomena in new ways. Her research interests include language and identity, language and race, language and beauty, bilingualism, and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. Last but certainly not the least, we have Dr. Roman Lesnov. Dr. Lesnov is an associate professor of English at Oakwood University. He teaches linguistics, English as a second language, and freshman composition. He holds a PhD in applied linguistics from Northern Arizona University and has several years of experience teaching English and linguistics in the United States and Russia. His research interests include second language listening, assessment, and research methods for applied linguistics. Thank you all for presenting today, and you have our undivided attention.
Hello, are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, we are.
Yes, okay, all right. So, welcome to our presentation titled Foreign Language Instructors' Perception of Job Satisfaction and the Online Environment During COVID-19. I am Profesora Sofia Volgein Nava, and I am joined by my colleagues, Dr. Eva Wheeler and Dr. Roman Lesnov. We are all colleagues at the Department of English and Foreign Languages here at Oakwood. A year ago, the COVID-19 pandemic affected the way that foreign language instructors perform their teaching duties. Even though online foreign language learning existed before this period, it was of a voluntary nature. The changes that instructors of foreign languages had to adapt to in order to continue performing their jobs during this time may have brought variation levels in job satisfaction, as well as the way that they perceive how they apply second language acquisition principles. Even though job satisfaction of foreign language instructors and perceptions of different aspects of online teaching, such as communication tools and online modalities, were studied recently, we wanted to explore how do foreign language instructors from many different university settings in the US perceive the factors affecting job satisfaction during the pandemic as they teach through different online modalities such as asynchronous, synchronous, and hybrid online modalities. We also study the perception of foreign language instructors' applications of second language acquisition principles to their online teaching during the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to perform our study, we designed an online questionnaire with 3 parts. The first part included questions regarding the instructor's perception of application of second language acquisition principles. The second part included questions regarding the perception of job satisfaction factors. And the last part included questions regarding their personal and demographic information. This survey included two types of questions. The first one was a sliding scale question in which the participants compared their feelings about a specific factor before the pandemic and their feeling about that same factor now. So for example, as you can see in the screen, the factor I use a target language in my classes, if a participant answered with a 1, that would mean that the participant felt that he is able to use a target language in a much worse way now than before the pandemic. The second type of questions were open-ended questions in which participants were able to clarify or explain their answers from the previous part. Now I'm going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Eva Wheeler, to explain who our participants were.
Thank you. For the pilot phase of the study, we recruited 19 university foreign language instructors using a convenient sampling technique. Our sampling contains women and men ages 25 to 55 plus. They represent various academic ranks, and we note an overrepresentation of graduate teaching assistants in the sample. Our respondents reported course loads that varied between 3 and 16 plus semester hours and 1 to 11 plus years of experience. Additionally, there was some diversity in training and experience with online teaching, institution type, and modes of instruction. So as can be observed, our small sample size notwithstanding, we were able to create and cultivate some varied representation. Now, Dr. Lesnov will speak about our data analysis.
Thank you. So we employed both descriptive and inferential statistical methods. Descriptive statistical methods included means or averages of teachers' responses along with standard deviations. Inferential statistics, like non-parametric t-tests or ANOVAs, analysis of variance, helped us to explore the effects of demographic variables, such as gender. The next slide will show the descriptive statistics for the first part of the questionnaire. That is, teachers' perceptions of how well they could apply second language acquisition principles in the COVID-imposed virtual environment compared to the traditional face-to-face settings. So you can see 3 columns here, one for the questions from the survey, from the first part, one for the mean or average, and one for the standard deviation value. So averages greater than 3 in the second column show that teachers were in a better position to apply the principle in the new environment, in the new virtual environment. Averages smaller than 3 show that teachers found it harder to apply the principle in the new environment. So you see the 5 principles highlighted in beige. So those highlighted principles, teachers found them harder to apply in the new environment. You can see that they are opportunities for output, question number 3, peer interaction, question number 4. Question number 7 was about student motivation. So teachers found it harder to motivate students. Question number 8, the modality allowing for best practices. And finally, student-student interaction, question number 9. So to put it differently, teachers found the new virtual environment to be more difficult to motivate students and to provide opportunities for output and interaction. The rest of the questions scored actually higher than 3.0, meaning that teachers could apply the corresponding principles in the new environment even better or more effectively than in the traditional face-to-face environment. So they thought they did a slightly better job providing students with input in the target language, question 1. They did a better job using the target language in class, question number 2, taking into account students' differences, individual differences, question number 5, integrating the target language culture in their classes, question 6, giving students strategies for learning a language, question 10, and assessing and engaging students, questions 11 and 12. Now, we also found some statistically significant effects of several demographic variables, and this information will come on the next slide. So the first demographic variable was that showed statistically significant difference was how many years of university teaching experience a teacher had. This variable had an impact on the teacher's responses for the question that you see in the quotation marks here. And the question was, I use the target language in my classes. So as you can see, teachers with less experience thought that they did a better job using the target language during the pandemic. In contrast, teachers with more experience thought that they did not use as much target language as before the pandemic. And you can see some comments from teachers that might shed additional light on this matter. But we're going to move on to the next slide, and which is about the next question that showed a statistically significant result. It was, I work with my students to improve their performance in the target language. Less experienced teachers thought they did a better job helping students during the pandemic, while more experienced teachers believed the opposite. Institution size was also a factor in how teachers perceived their work pre-COVID versus during COVID. So for the question about strategy instruction, I give students in my classes strategies for managing their own learning of the target language. Teachers from smaller institutions actually believed that they couldn't teach their students strategies as well as they did pre-COVID. However, teachers from large institutions thought that they were able to teach strategies and they could actually do it better than pre-COVID. And at this point, Dr. Wheeler will proceed with the results on the second part of our questionnaire.
Thank you. So here we're looking at the results from the job satisfaction questions from the questionnaire. For this analysis, we explored nature and quantity of work and working relationships, operating conditions and communication, and pay and contingent rewards. So as in the case of the second language acquisition principles, any items that are highlighted in the beige color are perceptions that worsened after the pandemic, and those that are in the gray color are those that improved over the course of the pandemic. So I'll start with those factors that improved, and so we're looking at 4, communication seems good within this organization, a factor that is not, a result that is not surprising given that if an institution has good communication, solid communication prior to the pandemic, we expect that that communication will continue following. Number 6, I like doing the things I do at work. This was actually a result that went counter to our hypothesis in that instructors reported slightly improved perceptions of their enjoyment of the quality of the work that they were doing. And that was something that was encouraging to see because instructors were not discouraged from doing the things that they originally drew them to the profession. Now we go to the factors that worsened. And so number 1, I feel I'm being compensated fairly for the work that I do. We saw an overall average that indicated that instructors had a worse perception of this statement. Many of our rules and procedures make doing a good job difficult. And so this is a question that gets to operating conditions during the pandemic. And that was another factor that decreased. Number 3, I have enough opportunities to collaborate and exchange ideas with colleagues. And this was a perception that was reported as worsening. We'll see a little bit further on some additional detail to that question. Number 5, I do not feel that the work I do is appreciated. And so that was a factor that went down after the pandemic as well. I have too much to do at work. Relating to the quantity of work that instructors were reporting, that was another factor that went down. And work assignments are not fully explained, going to the idea of communication at the department level or at the institutional level. And that was another factor that went down. So as we move on to the next slide, we're looking specifically at the results that came from quantity of work. So with respect to quantity, the research team hypothesized that the COVID-19 pandemic would have a negative effect on how participants evaluated the amount of work that their respective institutions expected from them. And the results for this question partially support that hypothesis. Regarding specific factors that influence the perception of faculty workload, participants point to increased time investment required by new teaching modalities, increased email and office hours to explain concepts that weren't fully understood in the virtual environment, newly imposed institutional deadlines. And you'll see in the chart that there is some variance in the responses where we have 15.8% that reported the quantity of work was much worse, 26.3% slightly worse, 31.6% that reported it was neither better nor worse, approximately the same, and actually 26.3% that reported that their quantity of work was actually slightly better during the pandemic. But for those participants who reported that their quantity of work was slightly worse or much worse, they also indicated a high risk of potential burnout. Meaning that these instructors indicated that this workload could be a determinative factor that would lead them to leaving the profession. And so the next slide is actually very much interrelated to the first, and it's the question of compensation. I believe I'm being fairly compensated for the work that I do. And so as participants indicated their perceptions of fairness, they also pointed to factors like increased workloads due to modalities such as the HighFlex teaching modality, salary reductions that various institutions had to institute in order to preserve jobs, and forms of uncompensated labor. And so here participants pointed to, for example, converting a face-to-face class to an online class without additional compensation for that time and effort. So we do see some variety here with actually equal amounts of participants indicating that their compensation was slightly better and slightly worse. And then the 15.8% that indicate that their compensation was much worse. So just an item to keep in mind. And then the last question we wanted to highlight was opportunities for collaboration, and that idea of collaboration between foreign language instructors. We had varied experiences, as with some of the other categories, with some professors, 26.3% reporting much worse, 21.1% reporting slightly worse, but then 31.6% reporting that their opportunities for collaboration were slightly better. And because we have these opportunities for productive collaboration persisting, the thing that participants highlight is that all types of collaboration are not supported because of the restrictions due to the pandemic. Some participants additionally indicate some feelings of isolation because of those restrictions. And so it's something that we would encourage institutions to keep an eye on, in addition to things like workload and compensation, those opportunities to collaborate and to stimulate innovation amongst professors and for the benefit of the students.
Thank you so much, Eva, and thank you so much, Roman, for explaining the results. So we accept that we have limitations in our research study. The most important one being our sample size. We have a small number of participants, and they reflect a convenience sample, meaning that they were not a randomized sample. This is also a pilot study, so the findings and the results are tentative. And we also accept the fact that we did not control for factors such as participants' personality and their personal disposition in the factors about job perception, satisfaction, and also the way they apply second language acquisition. So in order to answer our two main research questions, you can see that numerous factors, both in application of second language acquisition principles as well as job satisfaction, have worsened currently during the pandemic and teaching in an online environment. However, some of them remain the same or slightly improved. And so we would like to talk about how these conclusions may affect the way that higher education institutions apply these findings. So we would like to suggest higher education institutions to provide more professional development opportunities for factors that worsen, such as peer interaction and output opportunities. We would also like to suggest higher education institutions to solicit input from faculty and instructors regarding what resources and tools they feel are best in order to practice their field. And also to solicit input about how to balance the required labor that institutions want from the professors and instructors, as well as how to compensate them fairly. However, some of the results show that some institutions are doing and responding to some of these factors very well. In future studies, we would like to explore the practices and the processes that the institutions applied in order to have a positive impact in the perception of foreign language instructors. We know that there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to all the problems and factors brought by the pandemic. However, we feel that seeking input from the faculty and the instructors will balance the goals of the institution as well as provides for the needs of its faculty. And we would like to thank the Faculty Development Grant Program and also the many foreign language instructors that collaborated in our project, and especially my dear colleagues for your work and collaboration in this project.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. You know, certainly very, very practical. And I can certainly relate to many of the responses that were given in your presentation or in your research. There's a question: what is the modality of results?
Are they referring to the teaching modality, or just a little bit of clarification on that?
Okay, I suspect perhaps they mean the teaching, perhaps, I don't. Why don't we go from there?
Okay. Yeah, so that takes us to the demographic information for our participants. And we ask participants to indicate the modality that they traditionally have used, typically have used, whether face-to-face, hybrid, synchronous virtual, asynchronous virtual, or HyFlex. And then we also ask them to indicate which modality they are using as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we actually got a variety of responses. So we had participants who had previously been teaching online, doing synchronous virtual or asynchronous virtual. We had participants who were exclusively doing face-to-face, and then because of the pandemic, transitioned to doing some virtual or hybrid modality. And something that we also asked was whether participants had training and experience with online teaching before the pandemic. And so some participants indicated that they previously had no experience with online teaching, and they also had no training, and then they were expected to teach online during the pandemic, which contributed to some of those perceptions, right, about workload and the additional labor they were being asked to do. And so that was, that was what was going into that modality piece.
I find it very interesting that, you know, some of the instructors who had less experience found the online situation a lot easier to interact with the students in terms of teaching strategies and that type of thing. Very interesting. Thank you all so much for your presentation. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And please continue to do such a wonderful job as you continue your research.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very amazing. I really learned a lot. That was really good. And I just want to say thank you. So we will go break for lunch, and we will be back for our next session at 2:20 with the oral presenters. The poster presentation will be through Zoom, and the book was posted in the actual chat to see the Zoom link. And the students will start their presentation at 12:20. So hopefully I could see you in the poster presentation at 12:20, and then the oral presentations that will start back this afternoon at 2:20. So enjoy your lunch, and I will see you all later.